It started with a suitcase by the door, half-sipped, rushed. Her hands trembled when she hugged me goodbye, and I could feel her heartbeat pounding like a war drum beneath her sweater. She said it was her cousin's second cousin to be exact. Some car accident outside state lines. I didn't ask many questions. She looked shaken enough already. But if there's one thing I've learned after 10 years of marriage, it's this. When your wife leaves town with eyes that never quite meet yours, something is wrong. You ever get that feeling? That slow crawl in your gut, like your instincts are trying to tap you on the shoulder? I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything started to unravel. And what I'm about to tell you, it's going to flip everything you thought you understood about love, trust, and how well you really know the person lying next to you every night. Before we dive deeper, I want you to remember this moment right now, because by the end of this story, you'll realize you weren't just here to be entertained. You were here to learn something about yourself. Something uncomfortable. You might think you're just watching a story unfold, maybe while scrolling through your phone, maybe with a cup of coffee in your hand. But no, you're about to step into a real-life riddle. One that'll whisper into the corners of your mind and ask, what would I have done? Stick with me. Because not only will you get the answer to the mystery that brought you here, why the cemetery was empty, but you'll also uncover a much darker truth hiding underneath it all. This isn't just about a funeral. It's about secrets and what happens when they refuse to stay buried. Now, you've probably seen a dozen strange funeral stories or wife goes missing videos on YouTube before. Maybe some unexplained events caught on camera compilations. But this isn't dramatized. This is real. And it didn't go viral because of a jump scare or twist ending. It went viral because it slowly infects you with curiosity. It eats away at your assumptions, turns every moment of calm into a ticking clock. That's the effect this story had on me when I lived it, and now it's yours. But I'm warning you, what begins as a simple lie, a funeral out of town, soon spirals into something far more chilling. And I made one crucial mistake. I didn't follow her right away. Let me take you back to that morning. It was cloudy, overcast in that way that makes everything feel distant, like the world's holding its breath. I watched her load the trunk. Black dress, heels she hadn't worn in years, that old cross pendant she kept in her nightstand drawer, the one she only ever touched when something serious happened. She said she was heading to a cemetery 2 states over, some small town I'd never heard of. Glenrock, I think it was called. Sounded made up. I offered to drive her, even tried insisting, but she got oddly firm. No, really. It's family stuff. I need to do this alone. I let her go, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the silence that followed her departure was different. Heavier. She didn't text when she arrived. Didn't call that night. And that was strange. We all tell ourselves little lies to stay sane. She probably fell asleep. Maybe she forgot to charge her phone. But when the second day passed and her location wasn't updating, that's when I started searching. I Googled the name of the cemetery she mentioned. Nothing came up. No recent funerals in Glenrock. No obituaries. No deaths in the family. Just nothing. A digital void. I called her mother, her sister, her old college roommate. No one knew of any cousin who had died. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a bad phone signal. I was chasing a ghost. I drove to Glenrock myself. For hours, 1 tank of gas, and a rising dread gnawing at my chest. I expected to find something, anything, to anchor her story. A hearse, a chapel, a caretaker sweeping leaves off gravestones. But what I found instead, that's what kept me up for weeks. There was no funeral, no fresh graves, no crowd dressed in black. The cemetery wasn't just empty, it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Overgrown grass, headstones so weathered they looked like ghost names carved by time. I was the only living soul there. And just as I was about to turn around, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. There was a single rose, fresh, sitting atop one of the headstones. The rest of the place was a mess, but this grave had been cleaned. Recently. Carefully. And when I bent down to read the name, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. Because it wasn't her cousin's name on that tombstone. It was hers. My wife's. Same name, same birth date, same everything, except for the date of death. That date was 2 days from now. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the weight of what I felt. The panic, the confusion, the icy fingers of fear gripping your spine when reality stops making sense. Have you ever seen something that shouldn't exist? Something that rewires the way you think the world works? That was the moment everything snapped. Because suddenly, I wasn't just looking for a missing woman. I was trying to outrun a timeline I didn't understand, one that had already predicted her end. And whether you believe in fate, glitches, or something worse, the countdown had already begun. Now you're probably wondering, what happened next? Was it a prank? A twin? A threat? Trust me, I asked myself those questions too. I tore through every file, every lead, every digital trace I could find. But each answer I uncovered only led to more twisted puzzles. You want closure, I get it. You clicked on this video because you needed to know why a woman would lie about attending a funeral only for the cemetery to be deserted. And I promise you, before this video ends, you'll get your answer. But I also promise you won't forget it. The truth is, this story isn't just about death. It's about the lies we bury and the parts of ourselves we hide from the people we love most. It's about identity, memory, and what happens when reality fractures. As we move deeper, you'll meet characters who will challenge your sense of right and wrong, a mysterious priest who speaks in riddles, a stranger who claims to know my wife better than I ever did, and a voice recording that never should have existed. You'll see how I followed the clues, how I nearly lost my mind, and how I uncovered something so unbelievable, it still haunts me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, just know this. When I left that cemetery, I didn't go home. I went looking. And what I found, it changed everything. It's strange, the things your mind clings to when the world starts peeling apart. Driving back from that cemetery, I couldn't stop thinking about the last meal we had together. It was so ordinary: eggs, toast, that weird protein yogurt she only bought when she was trying to reset. We talked about nothing really. Bills. Her sister's new boyfriend. That TV show we never finished. But now, every detail from that morning felt loaded, like it had been trying to tell me something. Her hand lingered on the coffee mug a second too long. She checked her phone more than usual. She kissed me goodbye, but didn't say, "I love you." I didn't notice it then, or maybe I did, but refused to register it, because when life is normal, your brain skips the subtext. But nothing had been normal since she left. And by the time I got home, the silence had settled in like fog. Still. Heavy. Too perfect. I started digging. I went through her closet, her side of the bathroom, her drawers. Not because I was looking for anything in particular, just because I didn't know what else to do. It felt like there had to be something out of place, some clue I had overlooked. That's when I found a receipt, folded neatly into a book she'd been pretending to read for weeks. It was from a gas station, but not one on the way to Glenrock. In fact, it was in the opposite direction. 3 towns south. Bought at 3:42 a.m. the night before she left. The timestamp didn't make sense. She told me she was leaving around 6 a.m., said she'd barely slept. But the gas station was over an hour from our house, and if she was there before dawn, it meant she was already on the road long before she told me. And worse, she wasn't heading where she said she was going. That was my first real confirmation that this wasn't a case of miscommunication. It was a lie. A calculated one. I tried calling again. Her phone rang twice and went straight to voicemail. No new messages. No social media updates. No credit card activity. Nothing. It was like she'd stepped into a black hole. I told myself maybe she just needed space. Maybe there really was a funeral and I just got the town wrong. But the longer I sat in the house alone, surrounded by all the things she left behind, the more my thoughts spiraled. I opened her laptop, no password. Not like her. She was always careful about security. Inside, her browser history had been wiped clean. No bookmarks. No recently opened files. Nothing. Except for one lingering tab that hadn't refreshed. It was an article about identity changes, Legal name switches, relocation loopholes, social media vanishing tricks. I stared at that screen for a long time, my heart pounding so hard it felt like I was underwater. This wasn't grief. This was strategy. I reached out to her best friend, Emily, someone who used to practically live at our place during the early days of our marriage. Emily answered on the first ring, her voice hesitant. "You heard from her?" she asked. I hesitated. "She told you where she was going?" Emily didn't reply right away, then let out a long sigh. "She called me last week. She finally said, her voice low. Said she needed to disappear for a while." I didn't ask why. I figured it was marital stuff. Marital stuff? What the hell was that supposed to mean? I pressed her, but she clammed up fast, like someone who'd realized she said too much. When I asked if she knew about the funeral, she swore she didn't, and I believed her. She sounded genuinely confused when I mentioned the cemetery. But the thing that really stuck with me was what she said before hanging up. "If she's doing what I think she's doing, you need to stop looking." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying old conversations, trying to figure out when things shifted. It wasn't like we were perfect, but we weren't falling apart either, at least not from my side. Sure, she'd been distant lately. Zoned out. Lost in thought. But people go through phases, right? Work stress, family drama, the usual. But now I started to wonder if those late nights she claimed were conference calls were really something else. Or someone else. It wasn't about jealousy, it was about control. Or rather, the sudden realization that I had none. My wife could have been anyone. I only knew what she allowed me to see. The next morning, I checked our security camera footage, the one over the garage. I rarely looked at it, but I was desperate for something, anything. And there she was, caught in the early dawn light, loading her suitcase into the trunk. But she wasn't alone. A man stood by the driver's side door. Tall. Wearing a hoodie, head down. He handed her something. Looked like an envelope. She hugged him. Not the kind of hug you give a stranger. Then she got in and drove off, leaving him standing in the driveway. The timestamp was 4:02 a.m. 2 hours before she woke me up and said goodbye. Who was he? I showed the footage to a friend of mine who works in tech, Alex. He's one of those guys who can find anything with the right tools. Former cybersecurity, now works freelance and likes digging into puzzles like this. I asked him to enhance the footage, maybe get a license plate or a face. He worked on it for hours while I sat there bouncing between rage, fear, and exhaustion. Eventually, he paused the video and said, "You're not gonna like this." He pointed to the guy's shoes, something I'd overlooked. Bright green running shoes. One of a kind. "I've seen those before," he said, and pulled up a photo on his phone. The man in the picture was someone I recognized instantly. His name was Derek. Derek was my coworker. Casual acquaintance. Married. 2 kids. He and my wife had met maybe twice at work events. They barely talked. At least, that's what I thought. But now the timelines were colliding. Had she been planning this with him? Was this an affair? Or something more complex? Why meet in the shadows, in the dead of night? And why cover their tracks so meticulously, wiping browser history, avoiding cameras, disabling GPS? If it was just a romantic escape, why all the cloak and dagger? I called Derek. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I drove to his house, but his wife said he'd left for a retreat 3 days ago and hadn't checked in. Said he needed to disconnect. That word again. Disappear. Retreat. Disconnect. Everyone around me was vanishing and leaving puzzle pieces behind. The police weren't much help, not yet. No crime. No missing person report. Just a woman who said she was going to a funeral and didn't come back. They took down my statement, said they'd reach out if anything turned up. But they said it like they didn't believe anything would. Like I was just another guy whose wife decided she was done. But I couldn't shake that grave. The one with her name on it. And that date, 2 days from now, which by then was tomorrow. It kept looping in my head like a countdown clock. What was supposed to happen on that day? Was it symbolic? A warning? Or something worse? Was it a message left for me or for her? That night, I started having dreams. Or maybe they were memories. Her voice, distant, whispering things I couldn't quite make out. One phrase kept echoing. Asterisk, I had to leave before it found me. Asterisk, and every time I heard it, I woke up gasping, covered in sweat, feeling like the room wasn't empty even though I was alone. The tension had grown into something physical, like the air around me was charged. I started locking every door, checking the windows twice. Not because I feared someone breaking in, but because I feared the moment when I'd realize something already had. And still, the question haunted me. What did I miss? Why did she fake a funeral? Why leave town with someone I barely knew? And why did she choose a cemetery as her alibi? A place where things are supposed to rest in peace, not wake up screaming. But I was just beginning to understand that the story I thought I was in wasn't the one I was really living. The morning of the date etched on her tombstone arrived like a thundercloud in my chest. I barely slept the night before, too wired to rest, too afraid to blink in case I missed something. I kept checking my phone, refreshing her text threads, my email, even her old Pinterest account, like maybe she'd left a coded message in a saved kitchen remodel idea. It sounds crazy now, but when you're on the edge of truth and madness, you'll chase any lead, no matter how absurd. By 8 a.m., I decided to retrace my steps to the cemetery. Something about that grave kept pulling at me like a magnet beneath the skin. Maybe if I stared at it long enough, it would give something back. Maybe if I stood on that exact spot at the exact time, the world would split open and show me whatever secret had been hiding in plain sight. But when I arrived, the headstone was gone. Not vandalized. Not moved. Gone. Like it had never been there in the first place. The grass looked untouched, the dirt undisturbed, like no one had been there in weeks. I checked my phone, pulled up the photo I took of the grave just 2 days earlier. There it was, crystal clear. Her name, her birth date, the impossible date of death. But when I showed it to the groundskeeper who happened to be making his rounds that morning, he looked at me like I was describing a dream. That spot's been empty for years, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. No burial ever filed there. Nothing in our records. I showed him the photo. His brows furrowed. That's not even our headstone style. Ours are all marble, not granite. And we don't do roses on top. I asked if maybe someone had placed a private marker, something temporary. He shook his head. You're not the first to come looking for something that isn't there, he said quietly. Then he walked away, like he'd said too much. Back at the car, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Tucked beneath the windshield wiper was a plain envelope. No name. No return address. I looked around the lot. Only 2 other cars, both empty. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. It said, in blocky, typed letters, asterisk, stop looking. You won't like what you find. Asterisk, that was it. No signature. No instructions. Just a threat, or maybe a warning. I brought the note to Alex, my tech friend. He scanned it for prints, but it was clean, too clean. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, he said. This paper's from a pack sold exclusively online. No store tags. It's like someone wanted to be invisible. I asked him if he could trace anything back. An IP address, metadata, anything. He frowned. I'll try, but this feels like a dead end. And that phrase hit me harder than he meant it to. Because every clue I found seemed to fold back in on itself, like a maze designed to keep me lost. And now someone was watching me closely enough to leave notes on my car, which meant I wasn't chasing shadows. I had stepped into something real. And someone wanted me out of it. Later that day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. The voice on the other end was older, raspy, maybe female. You're asking the wrong questions, they said. It's not about where she went. It's about who she used to be. I asked who they were, but they hung up before I could finish. I tried redialing, disconnected. And suddenly a new layer peeled back. What if this wasn't just about a lie? What if it was about reinvention? About someone running from a life that never fully let go? I dug into her early years, something I'd never done because, honestly, I trusted her. Her high school records, old family photos, college transcripts. But none of it lined up perfectly. Names of friends she swore were close weren't in her yearbooks. A college she said she graduated from had no record of her under her maiden name. At first, I thought maybe it was just data loss, bureaucracy. But then I found a news clipping from a town 2 states away. A different name, but her face.
Clear as day.
A story about a missing girl from 20 years ago. A runaway. Possibly abducted, but never found. The photo was younger, obviously. But the smile, the eyes, it was her. Or someone who could have been her twin. The article described her as quiet, private, someone who didn't leave many clues behind. I called the number listed in the article's byline, a retired journalist named Randall. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did, and when I mentioned the name from the article, he got quiet. "You say she's alive?" he asked. I told him I wasn't sure. Told him about the funeral, the empty cemetery, the note. He exhaled slowly. "She wasn't the only one who disappeared that year," he said. "That town had 3 vanishings. 2 girls and 1 boy. All the same age. All within 6 months. I asked if they were ever found. He said no. But if you really want answers," he added, "you need to find the boy's brother. He's the only one who ever claimed to know what happened." Alex helped me track him down. His name was Mason Doyle. Ex-military, off the grid, living in a trailer just outside a forgotten patch of woods in Oregon. I made the drive, heart pounding, unsure what I would say when I got there. The place was barely standing. Tarp roof. Satellite dish from another decade. But he opened the door before I knocked, like he'd been expecting me. He stared at me for a long second, then said, "She's not who you think she is. And if she came back to say goodbye, someone's already following you." Inside his trailer, the walls were covered with old photos, news clippings, handwritten maps. He had a whole section dedicated to the missing girl, the one who looked like my wife. And he pointed to a grainy photo of 3 teenagers. One of them, I swear, looked like Derek, my coworker. The same guy who was caught on my security cam handing my wife an envelope. "That's him," Mason said. He changed his name, but I never forgot that face. I asked what they were running from. He shook his head. "Not what, who. We thought we escaped it. We thought we could disappear. But some things follow you no matter how far you go." And just as he started to explain, there was a loud knock on the trailer door. Mason's eyes widened and he whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." And that's when everything started unraveling again. The knock came like a hammer, 3 heavy raps that vibrated through the rusted trailer walls and froze the air around us. Mason shot up from his chair and motioned for me to stay silent. He grabbed a small revolver from beneath a stack of newspapers and moved toward the door with the wary grace of someone who had lived too many years expecting things to go sideways. My pulse roared in my ears. I had no idea who could be out there, but I knew, instinctively, that this wasn't a friendly visit. Someone had followed me, or maybe they'd been following Mason all along, waiting for someone like me to lead them right to him. Whoever they were, they knew exactly when to show up, and that timing alone made my stomach twist. Mason peeked through the blinds, muttered a curse under his breath, and turned to me with a look that said everything was about to change. "That's not someone we can talk to," he whispered, eyes scanning for an exit. "That's someone we need to lose." Before I could ask who it was, he threw open the back window and gestured for me to climb through. The metal frame scraped my arms as I crawled out into the cold Oregon air, heart hammering. Mason followed, landing with a grunt in the damp grass. We sprinted through the woods behind his trailer, the crunch of leaves and snapping branches loud in the silence of the trees. After several minutes, we ducked behind a fallen log, both of us gasping for breath. "Who the hell was that?" I finally managed. Mason didn't answer right away. He just pulled out a crumpled photo from his pocket, one I hadn't seen before. It was a blurry image of a man standing outside a motel, face shadowed, but the jacket he wore was unmistakable. It was Derek. Again. Mason stared at me, hard. "That guy your friend?"
He's not who he says he is.
"He's not just part of our story. He's part of mine. And if he's involved now, it means this thing's wider than either of us knew." When we finally made it back to my car, Parked off a gravel road several miles from Mason's trailer, I checked my phone and saw 2 missed calls from Alex. No message. Just 2 missed calls and one text that simply said, someone came to my apartment.
I didn't let them in.
They left this. Attached was a photo of another envelope, almost identical to the one I'd found under my windshield wiper. Inside was a note. Tell him to stop. You're not safe either. There was no name, no address, no return number. Whoever was sending these threats was watching both of us now, and they had no problem spreading the net wider. I called Alex immediately, and when he picked up, I could hear it in his voice. He was scared. Not paranoid, not anxious.
Scared.
This isn't just about your wife anymore, he said quietly. I dug deeper into Derek like you asked. And I found something, but I'm not sure I should have. Alex had accessed records that weren't supposed to be accessible. Old sealed documents, federal databases. Derek had gone by another name before he joined our company. Jason T. Reynolds. And under that name, he had been part of a government witness protection program nearly 15 years ago. The records were heavily redacted, but one section mentioned a cult compound in the Midwest, an illegal surveillance operation, and 4 disappearances that were never solved. I asked Alex if my wife's face came up in any of those files. He hesitated before answering. Not directly. But one of the missing girls had the same birth date. And there's a picture in the file. The resemblance is too close. Suddenly, everything I knew was being rewired. If my wife had been part of something like that, if she had lived under a fake identity, ran from a buried past, it meant the life we shared wasn't just based on lies. It was built on stolen time. But the more horrifying realization was this. She might not have been hiding from the past at all. She might have been hiding from someone still looking for her. And now that I was digging, now that I'd gone to the grave, now that I had involved Alex, the trail was no longer cold. It was burning hot. Just as I was trying to process everything, my phone buzzed with another call, this time from her sister, Marlene. I hadn't spoken to her in days. She rarely called me directly, but her voice was frantic, on the verge of collapse.
She sent me something, she said.
A package. It just showed up. No return address, but I know it was from her. I asked what was inside, and she took a shaky breath. A flash drive. A photo of a motel sign. And a wedding ring. Not hers. It's old. Scratched up. But there's a name engraved inside. Anna. I asked if she had plugged in the flash drive. She said no. She was too scared. She wanted me to look first. I told her I'd be there in 3 hours. But in that moment, the questions piled like bodies.
Who was Anna?
Was this another alias, another buried identity? Or was this someone else entirely, another woman pulled into whatever underground mess my wife had been trying to escape? On the way to Marlene's, I couldn't shake the image of that wedding ring. A symbol of commitment, of loyalty. And yet, here it was, abandoned in a box, sent to a sister who had no idea what she'd just received. When I arrived, Marlene handed over the package like it was radioactive. The flash drive was tiny, unlabeled. I plugged it into my laptop, with trembling hands. 1 video file. That was all. I opened it. Grainy footage. Shot in secret. My wife, pacing a motel room, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. She was speaking into the camera, whispering, "If you're seeing this, I'm probably already gone." I didn't know who to trust. I thought I could disappear quietly, but I was wrong. She paused, voice breaking. They found me once. They'll find me again. And now, I think someone close to you is helping them. And then the screen cut to black. That was it. No date. No location. No context. Just a whisper in the dark and a final warning. She hadn't just run. She'd been hunted. And she believed someone I knew, someone close, was feeding information to whoever had been chasing her all this time. That twist rewrote everything. The enemy wasn't out there in the woods. The enemy might have already been sitting across from me, smiling, pretending to help. I stared at the screen long after the video ended, feeling the weight of the silence around me. Everything I thought I knew had fractured. Every face I trusted was now a question mark. And worst of all, I was no longer sure if I was trying to find my wife or run from the truth she had died trying to bury. It was almost midnight by the time I left Marlene's house. I must have watched that video on the flash drive 20 times, each viewing peeling away another layer of numbness and replacing it with something raw and pulsing. Her face, her voice, the tremble in her hands as she confessed to being watched. It wasn't just fear I saw in her eyes, it was resignation. She wasn't trying to outsmart anyone anymore. She was trying to leave breadcrumbs, one final trail before she disappeared for good. And the most terrifying part wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't. The way she stopped herself mid-sentence, like she couldn't say what she knew without making it worse. Like saying it out loud would bring them closer. I got in my car, mind spinning, and as I turned the key in the ignition, that's when I saw it. In the rearview mirror, just for a second, a pair of headlights parked down the street. No engine sound. No movement. Just idling. Watching. I didn't go straight home. I took the long way, winding through neighborhoods I hadn't driven through in years, doubling back on myself, taking unexpected turns. Every few minutes, I'd check my mirrors. The headlights stayed close, but never too close, like whoever was behind me had been trained not to spook their target. By the third U-turn, I was sure. I was being followed. Not imagined. Not paranoia.
Real.
Someone was tracking me now in real time, and I didn't know how long it had been going on. Maybe since I visited the grave. Maybe since I met Mason. Maybe since I started asking questions I should have left alone. I drove to a 24-hour grocery store, pulled into the parking lot, and waited. The car passed slowly, then vanished into the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach. I stayed parked for over an hour. They didn't come back. But by then, the damage was done. The idea had rooted itself deep inside me. I wasn't alone anymore. And maybe I hadn't been for a long time. When I finally did get home, I noticed something off before I even opened the door. A window was cracked open in the living room. Just slightly, no more than an inch. But I knew I hadn't left it like that. I always kept the place sealed tight. Habit. My chest tightened. I stepped inside slowly, keys clenched in my fist, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a weight. Nothing looked out of place. No broken locks. No drawers open. But that's what made it worse. Someone had been inside, and they wanted me to know it. They didn't need to steal anything. They didn't want valuables. They wanted to remind me that I was reachable, penetrable, vulnerable. And then I saw it, sitting on the kitchen counter, next to the toaster. A photograph.
New. Glossy.
Freshly printed.
It was a picture of me.
Standing outside Mason's trailer, looking up at the trees. Taken from a distance like a sniper's lens. I stared at it for a long time, my own face looking back at me like a stranger. On the back, written in blue pen, was a single line. Asterisk, you're getting warmer. Asterisk, no signature. No date. Just a game now. A hunt. And I wasn't the one playing it. I was the one being played. That was the night everything changed. Not because of the photo, but because of what happened next. I called Alex to tell him about the break-in, to ask if I should go to the police. His phone rang, then rang again. No answer. Strange. He always picked up. Even at 3 a.m. But something about the silence this time felt different.
Wrong.
I tried again. Still nothing. I texted. No reply. I told myself maybe he was asleep. Maybe his phone was dead. But that gnawing feeling at the base of my spine told me something else. The next morning, I drove to his apartment. His car was still in the lot. Door locked. Curtains drawn. I buzzed his unit. No response. I asked the building manager if she'd seen him. She hadn't. I waited for 3 hours. No sign of him. Finally, I convinced the manager to let me in. She was hesitant, but I told her he was working with me on something important, and I feared for his safety. She reluctantly agreed. Inside, everything was in order. Nothing broken. No signs of a struggle. But his laptop was gone. Not stolen, taken. Along with a hard drive I knew he kept by the desk. His notes were missing. His files. Like someone had come with a list and checked off every item. And just like that, he was gone.
Erased.
I filed a missing person report that day, but I could see it in the officer's eyes. He didn't believe anything serious had happened. Adults go missing all the time, especially when they're under stress. But I knew better. Alex had been silenced. And if they could reach him, it meant I was next. I wasn't just trespassing on secrets anymore. I was getting dangerously close to something someone had buried a long time ago. Something they would kill to keep hidden. The weight of everything started crushing down on me. My wife's lies. Derek's betrayal. Mason's cryptic warnings. The photographs. The disappearing people. And now, this growing sense that no matter what I did, I was already too far down the rabbit hole. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Couldn't trust anyone. My world was folding in on itself. And the worst part? I was starting to question if my wife had ever truly existed at all, or if the version of her I loved was just a mask she wore to stay hidden from people like the ones who were now watching me. I thought about calling her again, just to hear her voicemail. Just to remind myself that she was once flesh and blood and not some ghost wrapped in layers of false identities. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, because deep down, I was terrified that someone else might answer. Someone who had her phone now. Someone who knew I was still digging. And if I heard that voice, any voice but hers, I wasn't sure I'd ever come back from it. And then, just before I collapsed from exhaustion that night, I got one more message. No sender. No contact info. Just a single sentence, delivered as a text from a scrambled number. Asterisk, you're looking for the wrong woman. Asterisk. I stared at those 6 words until my eyes burned. Because if that was true, if I wasn't even looking for the right person anymore, then everything I thought I understood about this nightmare was about to come undone all over again. The text haunted me all night. Asterisk, you're looking for the wrong woman. Asterisk, I must have stared at that screen for hours, dissecting the sentence from every angle, trying to decode its meaning. Was it literal? Figurative? A warning or a breadcrumb? I kept thinking about the video my wife left behind. The fear in her voice, the urgency. She hadn't named anyone, hadn't pointed a finger. But she knew something was closing in, and she had no intention of going down without leaving some kind of message behind. I started combing through every scrap of information again. The photos, the cemetery, the motel room footage, the flash drive, the timelines. I even replayed the old voicemail she'd left a week before she left for the funeral, the one I'd brushed off because it was just her saying she might come home late. But now I listened closer. There was a sound in the background I hadn't noticed before. Not static, not traffic. It was faint, but it was music. Old. Grainy. Something that sounded like a church hymn. And I had never once known her to listen to anything remotely religious. I brought it to a sound tech I knew through Alex, a guy named Theo, who specialized in audio restoration for indie film projects. I didn't explain much, just told him I needed help isolating background noise. He worked for an hour, peeling back the layers of the voicemail like tissue paper until he pulled up the filtered track and let it play through his speakers. "Recognize this?" he asked. I didn't. But he did. "That's nearer, my God, to thee." It's played in old Southern funerals, small-town religious ceremonies. Not exactly billboard material. I asked him to trace the version. Maybe it was from a specific recording. He pulled up a database. After a few clicks, he turned the screen toward me. The version matched a live recording made by a fringe church congregation based in a rural pocket of Mississippi. "The Covenant House," Theo said, reading from the metadata. "Real old-school cult vibes. Went dark about 10 years ago after a series of investigations." I felt my stomach tighten. That name sounded familiar. I started digging again, this time focusing on the Covenant House, and soon stumbled onto something I should have caught earlier. A newspaper article from over a decade ago, archived deep in local Mississippi records, detailing the disbanding of a rural religious commune after a fire destroyed their main chapel. 3 fatalities were confirmed. Several others, allegedly children, were unaccounted for. Among the missing names was one that rang like a gunshot in my head: Anna Marie Talbot, age 15. No known relatives. No one ever claimed her body, and her photo had only been published once. I clicked. It was blurry, low resolution. But even in that pixelated frame, I knew what I was looking at. It was my wife. Or, at least, the person I thought was my wife. But now, everything collapsed. If Anna Marie Talbot had died in a fire 15 years ago, how could she be the same woman I'd married, lived with, shared everything with? Unless she hadn't died. Unless she had escaped. Changed her name. Built a new life. And everything she told me, her childhood, her college years, her family, was a patchwork of borrowed truths and fictional filler. If this was real, then she hadn't just been hiding from someone. She'd been hiding from the world. I drove straight to Mason's, desperate for answers. I hadn't heard from him in days, and his trailer looked even more abandoned than the last time. I knocked. No answer. Just as I turned to leave, I noticed something tucked between the screen door and the frame. An envelope. My name written across it. Inside was a note. His handwriting. "You were never looking for Emily," it read. "You were always looking for Anna. And now they know you know." Below it was a phone number and 2 words. Ask Derek. I dialed the number from my car, my heart pounding. It rang twice before someone picked up. Silence. Then, finally, a voice, Derek's. But calmer. Colder. "So you found her," he said. Not a question. A statement. "Took you longer than I expected." I asked him who she really was, what the Covenant House had to do with any of this. He sighed, almost bored. "You married a ghost, man. A girl who was supposed to be dead. They buried that name for a reason." I demanded to know what he meant, why he was involved. He laughed, bitterly. "You think I'm a villain in this? You think I followed her? She found me. Years ago. Right after the fire. I was the first person who saw her outside the woods. She was bleeding. Scared. Wouldn't even say her name. I helped her disappear. And then she disappeared for me too. That broke something open. She had run from more than just a church or a past. She had run from everyone. She'd been in control the whole time. Even the way she left, faking a funeral, leading me to a dead end. That wasn't panic. That was planning. All of it. I asked him the question that had been burning in my mind for weeks. Why now? Why run again after all these years? There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped. Because someone else got out. A chill slid down my spine. "Someone from the church?" I asked. "No," he said. "Someone worse. Someone who knows what happened the night it burned. Someone who's not interested in burying the past. They're trying to resurrect it." And before I could say anything else, the call ended. I sat there in my car, unable to move, heart pounding in my ears, as the story twisted into something far darker than anything I could have imagined. She hadn't just been hiding. She hadn't just faked a funeral to escape me or her past. She'd been preparing for the return of something, or someone, who wasn't supposed to have survived. And now that I had followed her trail this far, I wasn't just in danger. I was a part of it. The drive to the location Derek gave me was long and hollow, like I was moving through the final stretch of a nightmare that refused to end. I didn't know what I was walking into, only that it was no longer about finding my wife. It was about uncovering the truth, the full, unfiltered truth, that had cost people their names, their safety, even their lives. According to Derek, the one who got out, someone worse, had resurfaced in a place where the Covenant House had once tried to rebuild itself in secret, an abandoned campground deep in the Appalachian foothills, near a town nobody puts on a map. They called it a retreat, but it was more like a scar carved into the woods. No signage, no power lines. Just a cracked dirt road that looked untouched for decades, as if even the trees were trying to forget what had once happened there. I arrived near dusk, the sun bleeding behind the trees like a warning. My hands trembled as I pushed past the rusted gate and stepped into the clearing. The silence was wrong, not peaceful, but staged, like the forest itself was holding its breath. In the distance, the skeletal remains of old structures loomed, a crumbled chapel, a mess hall, some cabins lost to rot. I moved slowly, each step crunching gravel that hadn't been touched in years. Then I heard it, faint music, rising from underground. A hymn. Nearer, my God, to thee. The same version from the voicemail. I followed the sound to a cellar door tucked beneath one of the larger cabins. It was slightly ajar. The lock snapped clean, like someone had already gone in ahead of me, or wanted me to think so. Inside, the stairs creaked with every step as I descended into darkness. The air grew colder, denser. The music grew louder. And then it cut off suddenly, like someone had hit stop the moment I got too close. What I found below was a room lit by candles, hundreds of them, flickering along the stone walls. In the center stood a single chair, and sitting in it was Anna. Or rather, the woman I had once believed was my wife. She looked up at me with calm eyes. No surprise. No panic. Just a quiet sadness that cut deeper than any scream. You weren't supposed to come this far, she said softly. Her voice echoed in the stone chamber like a memory. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My mouth was dry, my chest hollowed out. She stood, slowly, and walked toward me, her movements careful, practiced. Everything I did was to keep you out of this, she continued. You were never meant to know what I was running from. Who I was. I needed one life that was mine. One life not poisoned by what they did to us. I asked her who they were. She turned her head slightly toward the far wall, and that's when I saw it. Dozens of photographs. Victims. Survivors. Missing persons reports. My wife, Anna, was in many of them. Sometimes with children. Sometimes in robes. Always surrounded by the same people. And at the center of the collage was one face. A man. Middle-aged. Balding. Smiling in every picture like he had won something no one else understood. That's who got out, she whispered. His name was Elijah Ward. He wasn't a preacher. He was a manipulator. He didn't want faith, he wanted control. And we gave it to him. Willingly. Out of fear. Out of shame. He made us believe we couldn't survive without him. She pointed to a photo where he stood beside her as a teenager, hand on her shoulder, like a proud father. He died the night the chapel burned. Or, at least, that's what we thought. But someone pulled him out. Kept him hidden. And now he's back. Rebuilding. Recruiting. And this time, he wants me. My knees buckled under the weight of it all. Asked her why she didn't just tell me the truth. Why she built a life with me, only to vanish. Because you made me believe I was normal, she said, tears welling. And for a while I was your wife. I was free. But then the letters started. The photos. The music. I knew it was only a matter of time before he found me again. So I faked a funeral to keep you safe. But it didn't work. You came anyway. At that moment, I heard a door slam upstairs. Heavy footsteps. Not one pair, several. She turned to me, eyes wide now. They found us, she whispered. She ran to the corner and opened a panel in the stone wall, revealing a narrow tunnel. Go, she urged. I'll stall them. You still have a chance. I refused. Told her we were leaving together. But she shook her head. If he sees us together, you won't be leverage. You'll be a threat. Before I could stop her, she pressed something into my hand, a key. Small, brass worn. There's a storage unit in Knoxville. Under my name. My real name. Everything you need to finish this is there. The footsteps drew closer. I could hear voices now. Chanting. Low. Familiar. My mind swam with confusion and panic as she pushed me into the tunnel and sealed the panel behind me. I crawled in darkness, the echo of her voice fading behind me as the hallway tightened. I emerged in a woods, breathless, just as the first shouts rang out behind me. I didn't look back. 3 hours later, I was in Knoxville. The key fit perfectly into the lock of a weathered storage unit near an abandoned train yard. Inside, boxes. Dozens. Files. Photos. Evidence. Bank transfers. Names. Dates. Even a journal written in Anna's handwriting detailing everything, the indoctrination, the escape, the names of those still loyal to Elijah Ward. But at the bottom of the stack was something that made my blood run cold. A birth certificate. For a child. Mother, Anna Marie Talbot. Father, Elijah Ward. Born 12 years ago. Died 3 months later. Or so the record claimed. But attached to it was a recent photograph of a boy, alive, maybe 12, maybe younger, standing outside a foster home in Georgia. And scribbled across the back in my wife's handwriting were 4 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. Asterisk, he doesn't know yet. Asterisk. And in that instant, I realized the mystery hadn't been about my wife running from her past. It had been about protecting someone else's future. I stared at the photo of the boy for what felt like an eternity, unable to look away from his face. The same eyes, the same nose, the same curve of the jaw I had memorized in my wife. But it was more than resemblance. It was recognition, the kind that roots itself in your bones before your brain even catches up. He wasn't just some distant thread in Anna's tangled story. He was the center of it, the reason she vanished, the truth she had carried with her through every lie, every reinvention. And somehow, despite everything, he was alive. My thoughts spiraled into a storm of questions. Had she known he survived? Had Elijah kept him hidden all these years? And if he didn't know who he was, or worse, if he was being raised by someone tied to Elijah's shadow, how much time did we really have before he was pulled into the same nightmare she'd tried so hard to escape? I took the files to the FBI the next morning. It wasn't easy. I had to walk into that office with a stack of evidence that, on the surface, sounded like a conspiracy theory patched together with duct tape and desperation. But I told them everything. About the fire, the missing children, the new compound in the woods. About Anna, her real name, her disappearance, her warnings. And when I showed them the birth certificate, the bank records, and the photo of the boy, something shifted. The agent, tall, no nonsense, a man who looked like he hadn't flinched in a decade, went quiet. "We've heard whispers about this group before," he said slowly. "Nothing that ever stuck. Until now." They asked for Anna's last known location. I gave it to them, knowing full well what that meant. She would be hunted again, not just by the people she feared, but now by the government too. But maybe that was the safest place for her now, back in the shadows, on her own terms, where she had learned to survive. In the weeks that followed, there were headlines. Quiet, local, buried beneath the chaos of everyday media, but they were there. Federal agents raid abandoned religious site in Appalachian Forest. Long-suspected cult leader found dead in cabin fire. Investigators search for surviving members in multi-state probe. Elijah Ward was gone. Again. But this time it felt permanent. Whether it was self-inflicted or the result of something Anna had planned, I'll never know. The official story gave no answers, only redacted details and hollow press releases. Anna wasn't mentioned once. Neither was the boy. They had been erased again. But this time, I understood why. I drove to Georgia not long after, to the foster home listed on the back of the photograph. I didn't say who I was. Just asked to volunteer, to spend time with the kids, to do something useful after everything I'd been through. They let me help with after-school tutoring, yard work, odd jobs. It wasn't much, but it gave me a reason to be there. I saw him on the 3rd day, helping a younger kid tie their shoe, patient and kind in a way that reminded me of her. I didn't approach, didn't introduce myself. That wasn't my right. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I stayed close, watched from a distance, made sure the people around him were who they claimed to be. For now, that was enough. He deserved a chance to grow up without the weight of secrets strapped to his back. And if Anna was out there somewhere, I wanted her to know he was okay. I wanted her to know her sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. Some nights, I still hear her voice. Not in fear, but in those quiet, mundane moments we used to share. The sound of her laugh when she burned the toast. The way she hummed without realizing it when she was reading. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. Maybe she's still running. Maybe she's watching me the same way I watch over the boy. Or maybe she finally let go, the way we all have to in the end. But I carry her with me now, not the lies or the half-truths, but the part of her that was real. The part that loved fiercely and broke herself to protect what little light she had left. The truth is, I didn't just lose a wife. I lost the illusion of knowing someone fully. I lost the comfort of believing that love was enough to shield someone from their past. But what I gained was something harder to explain. I gained clarity, purpose, a responsibility to a life that never asked for any of this. A boy who might one day ask who he is and deserve an answer that isn't tainted by fear. And if this whole thing taught me anything, it's that sometimes the people we think we know best are living entire lives behind a curtain. And sometimes the only way to love someone is to let them stay hidden. Not because they want to lie, but because the truth might be more dangerous than we'll ever understand. So, if you came here looking for closure, I'm sorry. I can't give you that. But what I can give you is this: a story about love, survival, and the terrifying lengths people will go to in order to bury what should have never been unearthed. A story that began with a funeral that never happened and ended with a boy who doesn't yet know the fire he was born from. A story that maybe isn't over yet. And if you're still watching, maybe that means you've got your own questions. Just remember, sometimes when you dig deep enough, you don't just find answers. You find something that's been waiting for you in the dark.